Let's take our block and place it between the knees or thighs. If you don't have the block, that's totally fine. You will do bridge without a block. Recheck that triple S, and we're going to lift up just for a moment and bring the hand, either hand, underneath your sacrum. So we're just going to land our sacrum back onto that hand for a moment. Bring the other hand to your front ribs. Right away, notice if it feels like those ribs are way up, and slightly pull those front ribs in toward the body and down toward the pelvis to feel that safety pin. And then from here, safety pinning the ribs and the pelvis together. Let's slowly lift up into our low bridge and pause here. Notice as you lift the hips into a little bit of extension into your low bridge, does that top hand or the hand at the ribs really want to lift up? If so, feel that same thing of slightly pulling those front ribs in toward the body and down toward the pelvis so that we feel that safety pinning of the sacrum to the rib cage. You can add a tiny pulse, a lift and lower of the hips if you can hold that safety pin really steady. So again, that means holding the pelvis neutral and holding the ribs in that stack over the pelvis as we move the hips. Now let's stay in our low bridge, pushing into the big toes. Lift up that left hand, palm up toward the ceiling, and we'll pull back, stretching into some wrist extension, probably feeling some heat in the legs and the glutes. Switch hands, stretch out that right wrist, wrist extension. Breathe into your side and back ribs. Hands come to those front ribs. Let's take one more breath in. And then as you exhale, tiptoe the spine down, one vertebra at a time, staying as long as you can in that low back. Now you can use the block or not for our core work. Maybe you want to adjust the width. We'll start with the feet on the mat, hands behind the head, elbows up or elbows in toward the forehead. Right away, check in with the ribs. Feel that safety pin of the sacrum, the back of the pelvis, and the ribs. Take a breath in. Exhale, gentle hug on the block between your legs. Lift off the shoulder blades without pulling on the head or yanking or lifting from the head, but instead we feel those ribs pull down as we lift up. Inhale to lower. Exhale through your mouth. Lift off the shoulder blades without pulling on the head. Feel those ribs pull down toward the body. Inhale and lower. Exhale, hug the block. Feel those front ribs pull in toward the body and slightly down toward the pelvis as you lift up. Back of the neck is long. Now let's challenge that safety pin of the sacrum. Extend the left leg straight or straight-ish to whatever degree you can without the pelvis changing. And then rebend the knee, plant the foot down, inhale, lower. Exhale, hug the block. Feel those front ribs pull in toward the body and slightly down toward the pelvis as you lift up. Hold that hug on the block as you extend the right leg straight or straight-ish. Rebend that right knee, put the foot down. Inhale and lower. Let's continue to challenge the stability of that safety pin. Exhale, hug the block. Feel the ribs pull in as you lift up. Pelvic points draw in. We extend the left leg straight or straight-ish. Hold that sacrum the same. Let's roll that left thigh bone in. The hip internally rotates, but we hold the safety pin still. Bring the hip back to neutral. Foot comes down. Inhale and lower. Exhale, hug the block. Feel the ribs pull in as you lift up. Draw those pelvic points in. We extend the right leg straight or straight-ish. Keep hugging the block. Roll that left thigh bone or right thigh bone in. Bring it back to neutral. Step the foot down. Inhale and lower. We've got one more. Exhale, hug the block. Lift up without pulling on the head. Extend the left leg straight or straight-ish. Keep the sacrum the same. Roll the thigh bone in. Internal rotation. Maybe we lift this right heel. Keep hugging the block, pulling the ribs in. Let's undo all of that. Right heel down. Bring the hip to neutral. Step it down. Inhale and lower. One more. Exhale. Hug the block. Feel the ribs pull in as you lift up. Back of the neck is long. Right leg extends. Keep hugging the block. We roll that right thigh bone in. Internal hip rotation. Maybe the left heel lifts. Now keep the ribs pulling in. Lower the heel, bring the hip back to neutral, step it down, inhale and lower. Take a big breath in and out. We're gonna come to quadruped. So from quadruped, we'll come to hands and knees, or you can come to fist. We're not going to use the block on the sacrum, but we are gonna focus on the sacrum. So let's find our triple S here. Knees are going to be in closer than you think toward the hands so that the pelvis doesn't automatically tip forward. So let's feel pelvic points draw in. We want the front ribs slightly lifting up. So feel that safety pin here, connecting from the sacrum to the rib cage, holding it steady as we slide the left toes back. Now toes will stay on the ground to start. Zipper up. Float the left toes without tipping anywhere. Now this is going to be an elbow bend, but we're not diving forward. So I'm not even going to lift that left leg. I'm just gonna bend the elbows. My chest stays open, ribs stay lifted, belly stays lifted, and then straighten. Bend with this left leg extended and straighten. So they're kind of like tiny push-ups. We're keeping the chest open. So our scapula are staying pretty neutral. Elbows bending back, and we're challenging this pelvis to rib connection. So not letting the ribs droop or the pelvis tip as we bend the elbows. And then let's try the other side. Recheck your triple S. Zipper up that front body. Right toes slide back. Now nice and slow. Keep this left hip really steady as we lift the right toes up. Now we're not diving forward with the shoulders or tipping the pelvis or getting higher in that right leg. We're just bending the elbows back, keeping the chest and the collarbones broad, and then straightening. So this isn't really a teeter-totter or a tip forward and back. This is trying to control the torso. So controlling it with that safety pin, connecting the ribs and the pelvis and holding them still as we challenge that stability of the pelvis. Good, bring it down. Let's take some cat-cow. Whatever feels nice, you can take a child's pose. Check in with your breath. Okay, we are gonna start at the front of the mat. So we're gonna rise up and come to the front of the mat for our sun salutation one. Knees stay soft, and let's think about that safety pin here. So maybe for a moment, take your hands to the sacrum and the front ribs, and just notice, do they feel like they could be a little bit more aligned? And think about the ribs slightly pulling in and drawing down toward the pelvis. Find that stack, and then think about that safety pin, holding still as we reach the arms forward and up. Lift the armpits up, hinge forward. Right foot steps back. We lower the knee and the top of the foot. We're in our 90-90. Lift up here and let's zipper up. Hands will come behind the head. And let's feel the base of the skull really lean back into the hands. So we've got triple S. Hold safety pin here. Notice what's happening at the front ribs and the sacrum. Turn to the left, maybe an inch, and then bring it back. You can sync it with the breath if you'd like, exhaling to rotate, inhaling to center, whatever feels good, but really hold ribs and sacrum in that safety pin position so that we don't arch forward as we rotate. Good, bring the hands down, plank pose. Knees can be up or down in your plank, and let's think about that safety pin here. We really like to tip forward, so zipper the pubic bone up, lift the front ribs, exhale, lower with control. Land the pelvis, and then think, safety pin. Zipper the pubic bone up, lift the front ribs as we draw the chest forward, thoracic extension, low cobra. Tuck the toes, press into the hands, downward dog. Now keep lifting the ribs up toward the body, lifting the hip creases high. Big breath in, expand into the ribs. Exhale, lower the knees to quadruped. Use the core to lower softly. Right foot steps forward, left knee is down. We keep the toes untucked and we lift back into that 90-90. Check that safety pin. Front ribs and sacrum stacked. Hands behind the head. Now keep your safety pin as you rotate right and back to center. So the low back should feel really long. Sides of the body should feel long. We're growing tall even as we rotate. Now bring it forward, hinging at the hips, maybe hands come to a block or two. We step the left foot forward to meet the right, bent knee forward fold, push the ground away, rise up. Shoulder blades lift up. Keep your safety pin, hinge forward. So that means not drooping the ribs or tipping the pelvis. Left foot back, lower the knee, but not the toes. So we'll keep toes tucked under, lift up. We want ears over the shoulders, shoulders over the ribs, ribs over the pelvis. Feel that safety pin, sacrum to ribs. Hands behind the head again. You could also goal post if that doesn't feel nice. And we're gonna try to hold that stack. So hold your safety pin, but this time we side bend to the right, so toward that front leg, and then lift back up, grow a little taller. Side bend, holding your safety pin. So this means that as we side bend, we're trying not to tip forward in the pelvis or in the ribs. So hold that stack as we add this action of lateral flexion for the spine. Hands come down, plank pose. Your choice, knees up or down. Feel that length through the side body and the low back by imagining that safety pin, pelvis to ribs. Exhale, lower down. Land the pelvis. Think about your safety pin here. As you draw the chest forward, drag the hands back. Low cobra. Stay long through the low back. Tuck the toes. Lift up, down dog. Knees stay soft. Lift the front ribs up toward the body as you're here so we don't droop down. Big breath in. Exhale, use your core to land the knees softly into quadruped. Left foot steps forward. We tuck the right toes under. Lift up and let's feel triple S here. Safety pin, hands behind the head or maybe a goal post. Let's add that side bend toward the front leg. So we're side bending to the left. Any pace, stay firm in that right glute. Zippering the pubic bone up toward the belly button. Hands come forward or to blocks. We'll step that right foot forward to meet the left. Bent knee forward fold. Reach the arms forward and up. So we're going to soften the knees. Same safety pin. Reach the arms up. Shoulder blades lift. Hinge forward. Right foot steps back. We lower the knee, not the toes. Let's lift up and pause here. Safety pin. Really check in. Now there's two ways we can add challenge to this safety pin, the ribs over the pelvis. If it feels okay on the back knee, you can lift the front heel any amount. Remember, this might be a micro, little hover, just pushing into that left big toe and forefoot. Or you can challenge the safety pin by hinging forward at this left hip. But let's really use our hands as feedback. So maybe sacrum and front ribs, wherever you are, you could be upright, doing the heel. Hands come down, three-legged quadruped. Now our left leg's gonna be back, but let's pause with the toes on the ground. Lift the front body, lift the belly, shoulders right over the wrist. Now we float the left toes. You could have the block here on your sacrum for that extra feedback, but let's picture that safety pin. Hold it still. We'll roll this left thigh bone out in external rotation and then back in toward the body, internal rotation. And as soon as you start to move this left thigh bone or this left hip, notice what happens to that safety pin. Does the sacrum start to tip or move? Do those front ribs start to lower down? So really hold that structure here. Stay long in the low back. Good, come to quadruped. Let's take a little cat-cow, free up that mid and lower back. And then we'll find neutral quadruped. Establish that safety pin again, lifting those front ribs up. We'll step it back into a plank. You can lower from here or lower the knees first, readjust. Exhale, lower down. We're going to stack our forearms and lower the head down like a little pillow, however you want to have the head down, but let's establish that safety pin. So in this position, it will probably feel like tucking the tailbone a little bit. so that we can get that long low back and then that feeling of lift in the front ribs, like your front ribs are trying to lift off the mat. Now hold that. It should feel like a lot of engagement around the low belly and the glutes. Maybe we even lift the front of the throat up, but keep that feeling of the low belly and the front ribs lifting up. Good, lower down, hands under your shoulders. Let's lift into a down dog. Now, as we come to down dog, think about your safety pin. Feet are going to be in a lot closer to the hands than you're used to, because I want you to feel buoyant or light in the feet, really active in the hands and the arms. Ribs are lifting up toward the body. So we've got this nice neutral spine, neutral pelvis. Hands walk back toward the feet for happy squat. If you'd like to have a block with you, you can. If not, we're just going to use our hands. So we'll rise up at the back of the mat, hands to the front ribs or block. Either option, but let's really feel that safety pin of sacrum and ribs in alignment. We're just going to pick up one foot at a time, making your way forward as slowly as you need to go, as small as the movement of the hip needs to be to keep this feeling of the sacrum safety pin staying still. And then as you get to the front, hips can be about hips distance apart. Keep the hands or the block here. Let's inhale, soften the knees. We hinge at the hips, just like we did maybe in that low lunge. And then exhale, lift back up. And as we're doing this hip hinge, we're using the hands or the block to really lift the ribs up toward the body as we hinge forward against gravity, so that we stay really broad in the mid back and long in the low back. Holding that safety pin. Okay, you can put the block aside and we'll do that on the second side. So soften the knees, establish that safety pin, maybe physically take your hands to the ribs and the sacrum, and then reach the arms up. Armpits lift up, but we don't lose our safety pin. Hinge forward. Left foot back, lower the knee, not the toes. Lift up and right away. Check that safety pin. We're going to use our hands there, so whichever one you want to do. Long through the low back, so our hands are slightly just pulling the ribs in and down toward the pelvis. You can challenge this safety pin, maybe by lifting the front heel any amount or hinging. So your choice, whatever feels good today, but really use your hand on those front ribs to keep them lifted in toward the body, really securing that safety pin feeling, like you can move with that broom taped behind your back. Whatever type of low lunge you're doing, we're going to bring the hands down. Three-legged quadruped. So our right toes come back. We'll start with them on the ground. Feel this left thigh bone try to lift up into that left side of the pelvis. Lift the ribs. Now we float the toes. And we maybe have the block on the sacrum if we want, while we roll the right thigh bone out and in. So this is hip internal and external rotation. We want to keep our safety pin though. So what's normally going to want to happen is the belly will start to drop down because of gravity. The pelvis is going to want to tip forward, which looks like arching the low back. And then the same thing happens at the ribs. They're really going to want to droop down here. So hold that feeling of safety pinning the sacrum to the rib cage. We'll bring it back into quadruped, cat-cow, or maybe even a belly roll to free up the back, whatever feels good. Find your triple S, neutral spine. Step one foot at a time back to plank. Knees could be up or down. Let's recheck the alignment. Safety pin that sacrum to the ribs, and then lower down, exhale. Hands come to that pillow to support the head. Feel your safety pin here. So it will probably feel like maybe tucking the tailbone under, firming the glutes, drawing those two pelvic points in, lifting the front ribs up. From here, you can lift the front of the throat, but keep the back of the neck long, keep the low back long. Release it down, hands under the shoulders. Let's tuck the toes, lift up into your down dog. Now remember to walk this stance in, so we're in that really shortened triangle, down dog, light in the feet. Most of our weight is in the hands, so lift those ribs up toward the body. Keep that safety pin here. You can pedal the feet, you can do whatever you'd like. Bend the knees, hands walk back toward the feet for happy squat. You can use your hands or a block as you rise up, checking in, safety pin here, and then pick up one foot at a time, marching your way forward, using the feedback of your hands or the block, whatever's going to be more effective today. When you get to the front, we'll have the knees bent, recheck your safety pin, and then keep the hands or the block there as we hinge forward. Inhale, exhale up. Any pace. This could be a very small movement, small range of motion, but we're really practicing holding that stack of the ribs over the pelvis so that we move the whole torso and spine together. Okay, release the hands.